Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Task Force, JTF. My name is Chaim Ben Pesach. We have another program with the great David Ben Moshe. And this week we're going to be discussing how the Biden, Harris, Blinken administration is deliberately working to endanger Israel and destroy Israel. I mean, they want Israel eliminated. What they're doing is absolutely suicidal for Israel. We're going to explain it to you, things that you may not even realize the magnitude of how many different fronts they're working on to undermine and hurt Israel. And it's really, really endangering Israel's very survival, including the fact that they're tying Israel's hands and preventing Israel from winning the war in Gaza. And that's just one front. They're working on every front to undermine and hurt Israel. And it is essential. It is essential if we care about Israel and the Jewish people. It is essential that we elect Donald Trump in this election. And of course, David Ben Moshe is going to speak to us about important topics that he wants to raise, as he always does. But first, this program is dedicated to Refuah Shlema, complete recovery, for Mark Ben Sarah, Sharon Mitman, Shlomo Ben Sarah, Dorit Bat Sarah, Reuven Ben Shoshana, and Ruth Bat Sarah. And to Ilui Neshamot, elevating of the souls, for Malka Bat Meir, Allegra Bat Shlomo, Daniel Nankin, Victor Chazdai, Pesach Seb Ben Dov, Lunita Adler, Shifra Hoffman, Reuven Hoffman, Barry Hoffman, Arab Mir Kahana, Arab Binyamin Kahana, Sipora Fegi Bat Liba, Yosef Ben Meir, Robert Mittman, Dennis Shore, Helen Friedman, and Charles Zolat. Well, first of all, the Biden administration and Blinken, that self-hating Jew, Anthony Blinken, are getting ready to propose a resolution before the United Nations Security Council that will compel Israel to stop the fighting against the Hamas terrorists. In other words, to prevent Israel from winning and let Hamas win this war. Because if Hamas survives in any shape, manner, or form, if Hamas is not eliminated, and if the Arabs are not removed from Gaza, Israel loses the war. And it will be known as a defeat for Israel, and then Israel faces much, much greater dangers, Gaza's on Israel's southern border. On Israel's northern border, you have the Hezbollah terrorists, who have 250,000 missiles and rockets aimed at every Israeli city and town. 250,000, much more sophisticated than anything that Hamas has. And it was Iran that supplied them with these rockets and these missiles. Money, by the way, that Iran got all these years from oil sales. And now Iran has more oil revenue than ever because the Biden administration is crippling the American energy industry and making the world dependent again on Iranian and Arab and Islamic terrorist oil. 250,000 missiles aimed at Israeli cities. That means they could fire 5,000 or 10,000 missiles a day at Israel's water supply, energy supply, electric, all of its infrastructure, all of its towns and cities. Tens of thousands of Jews, chas v'chalila, could be murdered in this onslaught. It could cause panic and unbelievable chaos. Already, 100,000 Jews in the northern areas near Hezbollah have left their homes because of the danger here. So they've already gotten Jews, even within pre-67 Israel, to start fleeing from their homes. And in the southern border, 100,000 Jews also have left. So you have already 200,000 Jewish refugees in the state of Israel. That's what we've come to. And Biden is tying Israel's hands and will not let the cowardly Netanyahu regime and the cowardly leaders of Israel should tell Biden to go screw himself. But instead, we have leaders who are cowards and who are giving in. Biden is telling Israel, you cannot act against Hezbollah. Don't you dare attack Hezbollah's facilities. Israel has to attack and has to stage a preemptive massive strike at all of Hezbollah's facilities in order to survive. Because eventually this war is coming. And if Israel does not do it under the right circumstances, this could mean unbelievable catastrophe, the worst catastrophe that the Jewish people have experienced since the Holocaust. So Biden is preventing Israel from winning against Gaza, tying their hands there and preparing to introduce a UN Security Council resolution to prevent Israel from winning and to force Israel to accept the ceasefire. Of course, Israel can't be forced. They should just say to everybody, we're not listening, which is what, by the way, The Arabs, the Muslims, and all other third world countries do this to the United States all the time. They don't pay attention to the United States or the United Nations. But Israel's leaders, other than Moshe Feiglin from the Zehut party, whom we support, all of Israel's other leaders always are obedient to nations of the world that are trying to get Israel to commit suicide. And on the northern front, Israel is facing the 250,000 missiles, and Biden is tying Israel's hands on that front as well. And that really, really jeopardizes the survival of 7 million Jews are in real danger now because of that. Very serious danger. And then with Iran, we don't want a war with Iran. We don't want to expand the wider conflict because Biden and Blinken want to sign, again, a nuclear agreement with Iran, a nuclear agreement that allows Iran to develop nuclear bombs. But it'll be under the regulation of the UN agency, the UN watchdogs. While they use those agreements all the time they never kept any word. They never keep their agreement on any issue. They violate everything, all the Muslim countries and all Muslim negotiations. In the end, they violate every single agreement. Not one agreement that has ever been signed with Muslim countries in the Muslim world has ever been honored. And so they continue this build-up to building a nuclear arsenal. And Israel will face the prospect of a nuclear Iran, God forbid, with nuclear bombs, and Iran is on the verge of having those nuclear bombs already, because Netanyahu was too cowardly to take out the nuclear bombs all these years that we were demanding. And you know how many videos I did in Hebrew and in English speaking about this issue? And it was ignored, and Netanyahu continued with his cowardly policies. He made speeches against it. We'll never allow Iran to go nuclear. It's a threat to Israel's very existence. He's right, it is a threat to Israel's very existence, and he did nothing about it except make speeches. That's Netanyahu, he makes speeches. And so Israel faces the prospect of a nuclear holocaust from Iran, a real danger of a nuclear holocaust from Iran, and a nuclearized Saudi Arabia, because there's talk of normalization with Saudi Arabia and giving Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. By the way, that's a danger with Trump too. Trump also wants the normalization with Saudi Arabia and also push that, which is a catastrophe. So Trump also is a danger to Israel. He's a problem too. But at least on the issue of Iran, he is against renewing the nuclear agreement with Iran. And he is, he didn't do some of the things that Biden is doing, so he is definitely a lesser of the evils in this case. Although, remember, a lesser of the evils is still evil. What he wanted to do with Saudi Arabia, and he said, they're going to get Trump said they're going to get nuclear weapons inevitably anyway. They're going to get it anyway. Trump said, terrible. No, they don't have to get it anyway.
Also note that the Quran and Hadith say that agreements or contracts with non-Muslims are not binding. You could break them at any time you feel like.
You're commanded to break them the way Muhammad did. You're commanded to do what Muhammad did. Muhammad broke his agreement with the tribe Quraysh. He broke his agreement. You're commanded to break the agreements.
Right. He signed that agreement with the Quraysh tribe because he wasn't strong enough to conquer them yet. But as soon as he was, he attacked.
That's the same thing the Saudis are doing now. That's the same thing Egypt and Jordan did with Israel. Their so-called peace treaties with Israel are also a lie. By the way, Israel now also faces the Egyptian army on its southern border. The Egyptian army has violated all the agreements that Israel gave them, the entire Sinai, which is 3 times the size of the rest of Israel. Imagine to surrender 75% of all of your land. That's what Menachem Begin, the big right-winger, Menachem Begin, he gave Egypt all of Sinai for a piece of paper for a treaty that isn't worth the paper it's written on. And Egypt is violating all of the agreement. Egypt has built 60 massive tunnels to enable the Egyptian army to quickly enter into Sinai for war. Huge tunnels, huge excavations all over Sinai. All of its army is facing Israel. Egypt has 115 million people. Just Egypt alone has 115 million people against 7 million Israeli Jews, with a huge army that is armed by the way, their weapons are American, the most advanced weapons in the world, American weapons, built mostly by Jewish scientists in America. Jewish scientists, most of the technology in America that's built is from Jewish scientists. And so they have the most advanced technology in the world, the best weaponry, and they're facing Israel, and Israel has no army to protect itself anymore because Israel's leaders stripped down the army. They said, there are not going to be any wars anymore. We've made peace. There won't be any wars. There's no need to maintain tanks and maintain all these unnecessary things. And so they eliminated all their tanks. The Israeli army is stripped down bare. And Israel's facing huge thousands and thousands of Egyptian tanks, which are really American tanks, Abrams and the most advanced tanks in the world. The Israelis, you know what the Israelis did do? They built up the Israeli Air Force. That they spent huge amounts of money on because the Israeli Air Force are left-wingers. Even though the Air Force is going to be obsolete very soon. The whole world is turning to drones and unmanned aircraft to make attacks. Instead of Israel building up missiles, Israel should have an arsenal of missiles to fire back at Hamas and Hezbollah. If they fire, the Israeli missiles should be more advanced and more accurate and fire back at them and destroy them immediately. Israel doesn't have an arsenal of missiles. Israel didn't invest in that. Israel didn't invest in tanks. Israel didn't invest in armor. Israel didn't even invest in producing even the most basic ammunition. They don't have they're completely dependent on the United States for ammunition, even though they can easily have created enough ammunition to last them 100 years if they needed to. But the criminal leaders of Israel did not do any of this. Instead, they got paid off by American arms manufacturers, by the multinational corporations in the United States, who are also traitors to America, by the way. And they got the same ones that want the United States to sell to Ukraine and everywhere else, and all the enemies of America. I mean, traitors to America, traitors to Israel. And so they got paid off here, the Israeli leaders, and instead they just spent they just bought a huge new fleet of American jet fighters, $14 billion, that are completely almost useless against all these missiles and against underground tunnels, and completely useless. You can't win a war with jet fighters. You can't win a war that way today. And they completely destroyed Israel's army, the leaders of Israel. They have jets now, jets and jet fighters with pilots. That's going to become obsolete. The world is moving on to a different phase of fighting. The F-15s and F-16s and F-35s, they're so expensive and so hard to maintain, but the Israeli Air Force is the left-wing elite in Israel, and so they wanted to build that up and destroy all the other elements of the army. This is the type of treason we have in Israel's ranks, and Netanyahu is the biggest traitor of them all. And so we have this tremendous danger on our hands from Netanyahu in Israel and the bad leaders in Israel, and from Biden and Blinken and the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic leaders in Washington. And so it's urgent that we elect Donald Trump in America. Again, he's also no real friend at all, but he's better than Biden. He did not do the things that Biden is doing now. And notice, by the way, you see, JTF, we've been proven right so many times. In regard to Israel, always we've been proven right all these years. We told you the Hilltop Youth. You got to support. They say, the Hilltop Youth, they're crazy. They're fanatics. They're right-wingers. They're crazy. What's wrong with you? The Hilltop Youth, we said, support them, because they are the only ones that can block a Palestinian state from coming into existence, because Biden is now saying after the war, we have to immediately create a Palestinian state, and the United States is going to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. In other words, the United States is going to put an embassy on an embassy to Palestine. and exchange ambassadors and have diplomatic relations, and then, of course, the whole world will immediately follow. Can you imagine what pressure that will put on Israel? And so this is where we're going with Biden. But the first thing Biden did, what's the first thing Biden does to create a Palestinian state? He put sanctions on Hilltop Youth, on 4 Hilltop Youth. That's the first thing that he did. That's his first action, is to move against the Hilltop Youth. They're the problem. He didn't move against Malay Adumim and all these other big established Jewish settlements, because the established Jewish settlements, they're going to leave them there. That's only 3% of Judea and Samaria. They'll give the Jews the 3% and take the other 97%. That's the plan. The Hilltop Youth said, no way. The Hilltop Youth have gone into the other 97% in the middle and formed, in the most strategic hilltops, formed communities all along there and are taking huge amounts of land there. That's who JTF is supporting, and we're the only group supporting them. Biden and Blinken and the United States government and everybody, and the Europeans and the British and the French are all making sanctions against the Hilltop Youth. Why do you think they're going so crazy about the Hilltop Youth? Because the Hilltop Youth are the obstacle to their plans to get Israel to commit suicide. And they say, well, the Hilltop Youth have doubled in size in the past 3 years. You know why? Because we've raised $1 million for them in the past 3 years. We have given them $1 million in the past 3 years. That's why. And that's very little money. How much, for hundreds of families, how far can $1 million go? But they are so ingenious and so creative and so self-sacrificing that with $1 million, they've doubled what they have there now and expanded, and now they have other hilltops. And the 20,000 Arabs who live near the hilltop communities now have fled since the beginning of this war because of the Hilltop Youth. 20,000 Arabs have left the land of Israel because of them. They're not doing anything, and they claim it's settler violence. They're not doing anything violent to the Arabs. They're just raising their flock and their cattle and farming and everything else. And the Arabs say, well, that means we can't go there, and they feel intimidated or whatever they feel. But they're leaving, and they're saying the Hilltop Youth are responsible for them leaving. If the Hilltop Youth weren't there, it would be all over already. Can you imagine the destiny of the Jewish people and the state of Israel and the world? Because the world's survival and the world's destiny depends upon the success of Jews returning to their land. That's what the Bible says. If you don't believe that, you don't believe in the Bible. You don't believe in God if you don't believe in that, because that's what God says in the Bible. The destiny of the whole world is dependent on like 500 Hilltop Youth. and a huge portion of their budget comes from puny little JTF. We gave them a few $100,000 for the past 3 years, a few $100,000 a year. And the total comes to roughly about $1 million in the past 3 years. If not for us, situation would be much, much worse. Anyway, that's where we stand now. Now, you can make a big difference here. And by the way, if you have a lot of resources, those Jews out there that have a lot of resources, because some of the Jews that watch our program are very wealthy Jews, and you give to all types of crap causes, okay? Garbage causes that are not worth anything, like AIPAC, those self-hating traitors who support a Palestinian state. You give to crap organizations, evil organizations, or to organizations that accomplish very little at a time when the knife is at the throat of 7 million Israeli Jews. How could you be worrying about these other nonsensical things that you're giving to? JTF is where the action is if you want to save Israel. Can you imagine if one of these wealthy Jews that watches us decided to raise $1 million for us? That would double what we did in the past 3 years. Can you imagine what that could do for the Hilltop Youth? Look at the criminal reality here. I mean, the crime of American Jews with all their money and all their ability to help. How little they do when so little is needed. Look what Hashem has given us, such opportunities. Let me just say that there are 2 things you can do to help the Hilltop Youth. One, is you can help them online by going to hayamin.org. Hayamin.org is our Hebrew main page. You click on the donate button on top, and you can very easily and conveniently donate in a matter of minutes. Hayamin.org. That's online. If you want to do it through the regular mail, you send checks and money orders made out to JTF, to JTF P.O. Box 650327, Fresh Meadows, New York 11365. And I read through that address very quickly. I don't repeat it. I just read through it quickly because you can easily access it. Just go to jtf.org. Go to our English main site and click on Contact Us, and you'll see the address. You can also go to our forum and ask and find out and see what's going on. In our forum, we have a sticky thread on the general discussion, in the general discussion section, which tells you everywhere you can go and how easy and convenient it is to help the Hilltop Youth. This is what we need to do. It's urgent. We are literally speaking about survival. This is a life and death situation. We're speaking about survival here. What Biden and Netanyahu are doing, Biden with his pressure on Israel to commit suicide, and Netanyahu with his cowardly policies, unless we take action to make a difference here, God forbid we could be facing an unprecedented catastrophe for the Jewish people. Now, in Israel, politically, we're supporting Trump here in the United States because we've got to get rid of Biden. Biden must go. Not so much that we like Trump, but we can't. But Biden is horrible and has to go, has to be defeated. And so it's urgent that we help Trump as much as possible in order to defeat Biden, to stop Biden. Urgent. And in Israel, it's urgent that we support Moshe Feiglin and the Zehut Party. It's the only party telling the truth. Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu, all are opportunists, are phonies, all bluff, all lies. The only one who's for real is Moshe Feiglin and the Zehut Party. And we're trying to help him in Israel. We don't help him financially. We don't give him any money because all of our money is going to the Hilltop Youth. So we don't help him financially, but we help him doing videos and other things, and I'm doing interviews. I have an interview tomorrow with a pretty prominent person who was a leading leftist who now is no longer a leftist. And then I have an interview next week with an attorney who's very famous in Israel. I mean, I'm talking about interviews in Hebrew. So I'm doing interviews and I'm helping the Hilltop Youth in the interviews, spreading the word about that. And also we're helping Feiglin, because in the interviews, I also mentioned why we support Feiglin. So we're spreading the word as best we can. Help us. Participate with us. You're in this world for a reason. You can make a difference. Look at how little goes so far when you really want to do the right thing. Look at how little can go so far. And what will be the excuse for all those people who didn't help when the time comes? Help us. Help us financially. Help us spread the word about JTF. Help us spread the word about, we have the group Zionists for Trump. Help us with our videos. Spread the word about our videos and spread our videos all over the place. Help us. Help us make a difference. You know very well that at least here you're getting honesty and truth and real results. We're the people who led the Jewish Defense League when it liberated 2 million Jews from the former Soviet Union. We were the people who led that campaign. When no one else would do anything about that, we did it. I paid a very heavy price. I spent 5 years in prison. I was on probation, parole, and house arrest for another 12 years. Different types of court supervision for another 12 years, awaiting trial. So 17 years I was either in prison or on some form of court supervision. Very heavy price to pay, 17 years of your life. And then 27 years after that, for 27 years I've been barred from entering Israel. The leaders of Israel will not allow me into Israel because of what I did to save Soviet Jews and because of what I'm doing now to prevent a Palestinian state. Can you believe this? Every Arab terrorist, every Arab murderer, every Arab Nazi is welcome into Israel, and I'm barred.
Because they're afraid of you. If you come at them with a microphone in your hand, you could sway a lot of people in Israel.
That's exactly what they're afraid of. And they've admitted it. I mean, that's exactly what they're afraid of. Anyway, you can make a difference now. You were put in this world to make a difference. Do the right thing. Help us, support us, and get involved with us. We're giving you a chance to add real meaning to your life here, because that makes your life something that really is meaningful when you help a cause like this. We're giving you that opportunity here now. Take that opportunity for yourself, for Israel, for the Jewish people, and for justice. David?
I forgot to include this last week, so I want to do it now. You're a young couple. You're in your not young, but you're in your mid-40s. You have an 18, 19-year-old daughter who just started work. And one of her first assignments is she has to fly to corporate headquarters somewhere else in the country. So she has to be driven to an airport. So you call Uber to come and pick her up and take her to the airport. Uber arrives and Joe Biden is the driver. Would you let your daughter get into a car driven by Joe Biden? If your answer is no, how do you allow him to run the most powerful country in the world? We're still the greatest nation, not because we're great anymore, just because everybody else is so much worse. But we were once great because we were great. But we're still the greatest nation on the downside. How do you let somebody you wouldn't let drive your daughter, how do you let him run the country? And the president of the United States is also considered the leader of the so-called free world. Free, haha. How does that happen? I know this time you're going to make a difference. This time you're going to do something. You're not going to watch the World Series. You're actually going to go out and vote this time, as if that's going to make a difference. We need action. It's too late for anything else other than action. So Joe Biden must be defeated. He's an embarrassment to this country. His vice president is an embarrassment. Most of the people on his staff are embarrassments. So we have to clean house. I'm hoping, and I'm giving Trump another chance to come in and drain the swamp. Get rid of everybody who's suspect. Even if they haven't done anything wrong, if you suspect them to undermine the country, get rid of them. I wouldn't care if you got rid of everybody in Congress because they're all corrupt. Harry Truman said, you can't get rich in politics unless you're a crook. Well, they're all rich. And if you want to know how you can get rich, the simplest answer is run for office and become a politician, win that spot, and you can endow yourself with wealth up the wazoo. Look at, what's the attorney general's name? The district attorney in New York, is that Bragg?
No. Bragg, yeah.
He's now worth $40 million. His wealth has tripled in the last couple of years. How is that possible on the salary of a district attorney? It's because you can't be in government without being corrupt. There's just so much money from taxpayers paying taxes, loans, and money just being printed up out of thin air. So there's your path to wealth and riches. Run for office, and overnight you'll become wealthy. Look at Alexandria Cortez, Ocasio-Cortez. She's worth about 14 million now. When she took office, she said she didn't even have enough money to buy food until she got her first paycheck.
She was
on a salary of less than two.
She was a waitress earning minimum wage.
A bartender, yeah.
And she was earning minimum wage most of her life.
Now she's worth 14 million. How'd she do that on a salary of 175,000? If you're in New York, you have to pay about 50% of your salary in taxes between the federal government, the state government, and the city government. So you're taking home, say 90,000. You're taking home 90,000, say. So you get to take home a little more than half. 90,000 a year take home, but she has expenses living. How does she become worth $14 million in these few years? And she's probably one of the smaller. The fish rots from the head down. She's probably one of the smaller rotten tomatoes in the barrel.
But by the way, I just want to say one thing I forgot to say before in regard to what you're saying about Biden. I've mentioned this many times, and I think it's true. I think all of us are concerned. I think that there's a real chance. I think it's very possible. I hope not, God forbid, but I think there's a real chance that Biden will be replaced by somebody else.
The Democrat leaders are not stupid like the Republican leaders. They are not going to allow Biden to run for office if it looks like he's going to lose. It's not like he's a sharp guy who can have a last-minute surge. Every time he appears, his poll numbers go down a little more. So they can't have that. And they're not going to allow Kamala Harris, who has a lower approval rating than Biden. She's just a laughing idiot. So they're going to have to find someone. As we see it, it'll either be Gavin Newsom or Michael Obama. There's really no other choice. They're certainly not going to run Hillary again. She's used up material. Now, the Wizard of Oz is 84 years old this year. If you were to run into somebody with no heart and someone with no brain and someone with no courage, you wouldn't be in Oz. You'd be in Washington, D.C. Oh, here's a little bit on the Wizard of Oz. She's wearing, Dorothy's wearing the red shoes. So I'm watching the movie with Ashadina many years ago because we got it on Blu-ray. And do you remember the scene where they pick the apples and the trees start yelling at them? How'd you like it if we picked apples off of you? And then they start throwing apples at them because the scarecrow makes fun of them. If you notice in that scene, I started yelling out, "Continuity, continuity." Mm-hmm. They forgot to put the red shoes on Dorothy. That's just a little aside. Ashadina had no idea what I meant. Then I showed her she was wearing brown shoes, not the red shoes. How many times have we heard guns are a problem in this country? It's funny, guns weren't a problem in this country 100 years ago, even 75 years ago. Many schools, not in New York City, but many schools had gun clubs, and they would teach you how to shoot. We had full automatic weapons. You could own a fully automatic weapon. And yet we didn't have these mass slaughters, all this murder rate. This is insanity what's going on. We don't have a gun problem. We have a society problem. Now, you can keep your guns, but you have to fix society, because if you took the guns away, I'll give you an example. A magistrate judge shot her boyfriend, who was asleep in bed. If she didn't have a gun, she would have plunged a knife into him and killed him. This is a magistrate judge, so you can see where society is. This is one sick society that we live in. It is so dangerous, and they don't want you defending yourself from this danger. They want to take your guns away. Anytime there's a serial killing, they say we got to take guns off the street. We got to ban guns. So they want to take the guns away from the people that had nothing to do with the killing. Another case, a man raped a woman, and then he shot and killed her. Actually, I think he stabbed her and killed her because he cut her up after that. And then he started to eat her. Now tell me that's not a sick society. And in the town of Dalton, the continuing saga, Dalton, one of the suburbs of Chicago, just outside Chicago, and in Thornton Township, because the mayor of Dalton is also the supervisor of Thornton. Thornton is a bunch of villages that combined under one supervisor. So the mayor there has Thornton $5 million in debt, and Dalton $7 million in debt, and they don't have the money to pay the bills. And now the bank is coming after them. They're threatening to repossess all the police cars. Can you imagine police on foot or on bicycle? It takes them long enough if you call them. Because when you call the police and you need a police officer badly, they're minutes away when you need an officer in seconds. So they're so in debt, and the town council, who was not advised on these expenses, can't pay it, and they refuse to pay it because this is all the mayor's doing. And it's the same thing in Thornton Township, which is much bigger than Dalton. So it looks like, I don't know, the head trustee, I guess you call that the head of the city council, he's running against the mayor, and hopefully he'll win. And he seems like a genuine guy. But then the mayor, when she was on the board of trustees, she seemed like a genuine woman, pointing out all the corruption of the mayor. She takes over, and she's that mayor on steroids. So this is what's going on in our small towns. Meanwhile, crime is up, and they want to repossess the police cars.
But by the way, I don't know if people saw it the past couple of days, but Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, estimated that California was going to have a $38 billion deficit this year. The latest nonpartisan agency that oversees the deficit in California, which is nonpartisan in California means there's still left-wing Democrats, but even they said that they think it's going to be not 38 billion, but $73 billion debt for one state, for California. Now, California by far is the biggest state in population. And if its economy goes under completely, it will affect the economy of the entire United States because everything is interconnected. $73 billion debt. That means just the debt payment for 1 year, just the debt payments in California for 1 year exceed the budgets for over 80% of the countries in the world. The whole budget and everything else in all these 80% of the countries in the world is smaller than 1 year's debt in the state of California. This is what left-wing Democrats do when you give them power. This is what happens. And by the way, the governor of New York, that beast, Yamashma, Hutchell, that filthy pig.
I think it's Hochul.
Hochul, Hutchell.
Or Holcomb.
Yeah, well, it's just the lowest vermin on the face of the earth. Anyway, she just passed a bill to give checks out to all the illegal aliens, special subsidies for the illegal aliens to make sure they're more comfortable. She just passed a bill to give them check, which of course is an open invitation for millions more to come flooding in. You know, when they see, oh, wow, they're giving us checks for just sending us checks now for no reason, just giving us checks. Here, you're an illegal alien? Oh, check from the state of New York. She just passed a bill to do that. I mean, this is the left-wing Democrats. Why would, the Republicans are also, I don't like the Republicans, believe me, okay? But the left-wing Democrats, these are communists. I mean, why would anybody support them? I can't understand. How could anybody support them?
A lot of them are not communists. They're anarchists, too. So that's the Democrat Party, communists and anarchists.
And all of them are anti-Semitic. All the Democrats are anti-Semitic. That is a party that is anti-Semitic.
Also anti-God. You remember it a few conventions ago when they mentioned God, the whole place erupted in boos.
Right. When they mentioned Israel, by the way, the whole place erupted in boos also. You remember that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So, so violently anti-Semitic, so evil. And all the Jews and the Jewish Democrat politicians, all anti-Semites. All of them, like this guy Schiff in California. What a Jew-hating pig. And the other one, Dan Goldman, who represents a district with a lot of Orthodox Jews in New York, and they vote for Dan Goldman. He's a fellow Jew. He's a fellow Jew. He, by the way, wrote letters, organized letters to Biden to tell him to crack down on the Hilltop Youth and crack down on the Jews of Judea and Samaria. He organized letters to do that. Dan Goldman. And do I have to tell you about Bernie Sanders? Do I have to tell you about him? My name is Bernie Sanders. I come from Flatbush in Brooklyn. I mean, just the lowest of the low. The lowest of the low. How can anybody support them? Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry to interject.
I don't like it, but I understand it when you said the Jews in Brooklyn vote for Goldman because he's Jewish. I remember in New York when Mario Cuomo was governor, this woman said, Italian woman. I don't agree with any of his policies, but he's Italian, so I'm going to vote for him. I remember when, what was his name? John Lindsay was the mayor of New York. A woman said, I don't agree with anything he's doing, but he's so handsome, I'm going to vote for him. So people have, I don't know, I think you should have to take an intelligence test before you can vote, because the founders didn't want stupid people voting. You had the founders in the original Constitution, you had to be white, you had to be male, and you had to be a property owner. They wanted you to have skin in the game before you decided the fate of the country. So today, we not only let everybody vote, everybody and their brother, even if you're not registered. I know because in Queens, my mother's closest friend was one of those pollsters near my house. I was going to say near where you live, but it's not that close to where you live.
You mean a poll watcher? You mean a poll watcher?
Yeah, not a watcher, but you had to sign your name in the book. And but in her last year, because she died shortly after, a few years after that, and she could have saved herself. They wanted her to get up out of bed. They said, you're going to die of congestive heart failure. And she didn't want to get out of bed in the hospital. So she died. But anyway, she was told to let anyone who wants to vote, vote. And that's, I'm assuming that's all over the city. I don't know. But that was certainly where I went to vote. And every time I went back there, I was used to look in the gym and the auditorium where I spent quite a bit of time. It was nostalgic going back to the school the junior high school I was in as a 500 years ago as a youth. Okay, the illegals. When they're released from the police station, they come out with their middle finger raised on both hands to the people standing around, to the camera crews, to the newsmen, back to the pointing it to the police station. They're giving this country the finger. They're peeing on our flag and they're giving the people of this country the finger. Well, you know where that comes from? No, nobody knows this, but I was a teenager then during the 100 Years' War between England and France. The French had an overwhelming army, but of course they were the French. The British had a lot of bowmen, and the French said they were going to chop the bow finger off the British bowmen after the battle. Now the bow, the string, was made out of the intestine of a ewe, EWE. What is that? That's a male sheep, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
And you pluck the bow.
Is that like a lamb?
No, I don't. Is it a lamb? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
The intestine to make the bowstring.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And your bow finger, not with a crossbow, but with a long bow, was your middle finger. So after the British defeated the French once again, and the French are retreating, the British held up their middle finger, yelling, "Pluck you," meaning pluck the bow, and the string was of the ewe. And that's where that comes from. It's pluck you, not. So I was thinking when these illegals were saying, holding up their middle finger, oh, they're bowmen, it's pluck you. But now you know where that comes from. Maybe someday I'll tell you where don't throw the baby out with the bathwater comes from. And why brides carry flowers. Okay, I've got one more thing. I have one more thing. Boy, my New York. I couldn't even lose my New York accent after 14 years in Arizona. There was a great Roman philosopher, Cicero, and I have what he wrote here. And this is so true. It was true then. It's true today. And today we see it happening. I'll take my glasses off because I just wear them for status. A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive traitors from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst us, those within the gates freely. his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. He speaks in the accents familiar to his victims. He wears their face and their arguments, and he appeals to their baseness that lies deep in the hearts of all men. He rots the soul of a nation to undermine the pillars of a city. He infects the body politic so that it can no longer resist. A murderer is less to be feared. That's what's happening today. And before I turn it back to Chaim, I have a question for Chaim. If California owes somewhere between 38 billion and 73 billion, they are not a nation. They can't just print money as a whim. Where are they going to get this money? A lot of the people in California now are poor, living off the state. Where is tens of billions of dollars to pay these loans back in the future going to come from? I mean, if Biden's president, I could see him bailing them out with printed money. But if Biden's no longer president, where are they going to pay this back?
Well, they are going to, of course, try to fleece the people of California that still have anything left. They're going to try to fleece them, and they're going to cause more. 700. By the way, 700,000 Californians left the state this year or last year. 700,000 in 1 year. I mean, it's a mass exodus. And they're headed all to states. I wonder why. They're all headed to states with conservative Republican governors. I don't understand why. Texas.
Well, some are coming here. Some are, because they're coming here, not in the numbers they go to Florida and Texas, but being we're right next door, if they have family left in California, it's easy for them to go back and visit. And 14 years ago, we paid $281 for this huge house I'm living in. Now, because of all the Californians coming here, it's worth well over $700,000.
Wow. But yeah, they're also going to Nevada, by the way, also. Some of them are going to Nevada, Washington State also. So it's not, but the states with the biggest number that are attracting biggest numbers, of course, are Texas and Florida, which have Republican governors. But anyway, and by the way, your state, your home state of Arizona, does not have anywhere near the type of policies that California has. You have Republicans in the state legislature. You have all types of Republican elected officials in the state. It's not like California. California and New York are what happens when Democrats take over, really take over. Then it's just downhill all the way.
Well, we have some fools voted for a Democrat to be governor. You would think right away she'd be on our guns. She hasn't said a word about guns. She hasn't said a word about anything. She's basically non-existent. She took down those barriers of the cargo things that you see on trains that I guess the previous governor put up to block the border. She took them down. And since then, she must have caught hell because not a word from her. You wouldn't even know she's there.
But anyway, in answering your question again, one of the things we mentioned is they're going to try to fleece the people of California even more because they have no other choice. And the second thing is, Biden, of course, will want to bail them out if he gets reelected. He's going to bail them out. And so the taxpayers of the whole country are going to go down, are going to go bankrupt. Helping them in that bottomless, because it's a bottomless hole, California now. It's become a bottomless pit. You have millions and millions of people who never want to work, who are just criminals, who gang members, drug dealers, and the lowest of the low, massive mile after mile after mile of homeless tent cities. I mean, it's a nightmare. All the big stores are closing down because they're robbing every store blind. I mean, it's just you can't function in the city. Places like
another Safeway is leaving San Francisco. They're closing up. Safeway is a big supermarket chain out west. They're owned by Albertsons, another big chain, and they're closing up in one area and leaving. And the residents are screaming, but they're not there for charity. They're there to make a profit. It's a corporation. And so they can't take the losses anymore because somebody came out with a ridiculous figure in California that if you steal $980 or less worth of stuff, It's not a crime.
They're not arresting people who steal even more than that.
Really? How can you tell? Oh, this guy stole 1,020, so we're going to arrest. How do they know? These guys grab and run.
They're not. They have a new policy. They don't arrest anybody, and they have people who are going. They have people who are literally coming in with giant carts and just filling it up and filling with and taking several $1,000s worth of merchandise and walking out and laughing the whole time and giving and also in some cases they also gave the middle finger while they're walking out laughing. So that's California, and LA, San Francisco, people are not going to work. They're afraid to go to work. Children are afraid to go to school. People are afraid to go shopping. People are afraid to leave the house. It's unbelievable. I mean, the whole state is terrorized, and people, of course, people who can leave are fleeing, and the end result is they're hoping Biden gets reelected so that he'll bail them out. If Trump gets in there, I don't think Trump will want to bail them out. Can't be sure. I hope not. I hope he wouldn't. But, but they know that the trend of the United States in general, eventually the whole United States is going to become just like them. They know that. They see what the trends are. They see the demographics. They see the trends. So, they figure eventually they're going to, one way or another, eventually they're going to get bailed out. A possibility, of course, is that they just go bankrupt. That's a possibility. They just fail to pay their bondholders, the debt holders, that they just failed to pay them. That's a possibility as well. That could happen theoretically. So it's or they could get a loan from the federal government.
And then you got to pay that back.
Right, and a so-called loan, and then you know what happened? You know how they do it? This is what happens in the third world countries. This is what Egypt does, for instance. Egypt, Pakistan, all these other countries. What they do is they get giant loans, and then they can't repay the loan. When the time comes for them to repay the loan, they can't pay it. So they get another loan to pay the former loan. And they keep getting loan after loan, and the loans that just get bigger and balloon and balloon and balloon and get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they never repay them. Never repay the loans. They just keep getting more and more loans from the International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank. Of course, most of the money comes from American taxpayers, of course. Insanity, insanity, insanity. At least Trump did speak about those things. He is speaking about how the United States has been the ultimate suckers of the world. He has spoken about that. Biden and Blinken, on the other hand, they think we're not giving enough. They want to do even more. It's just... it really is unbelievable. The United States is becoming a mental asylum, and hopefully something will happen to turn the situation around. But in the interim, if anybody cares about the survival of America or Israel, Biden for sure, reelecting him for sure will be a disaster. And if they replace him with Michelle Obama or somebody else, God forbid, catastrophe. That would be even worse, by the way. Having Michelle Obama in there would be even worse, because I would rather have a brain-dead president, because all he's doing is evil anyway. I want him to be ineffective. I don't want him to be effective, because what he does, everything he does is bad for us. I want him to fail in what he's trying to do, because all the things he wants to pass and all the things he wants to are all bad. So I'd rather have a brain-dead president than someone like Michelle Obama. Her and her husband would get back into the White House and would start really, really devastating this country. I mean, decimating America if they got in, God forbid. So that's where we stand. In your heart, you know we're right. And in your guts, you know they're nuts. Let's get involved. Let's act. Because who was it that said, in order for evil people to win, the righteous or the good people just
need to do nothing.
Just do nothing, and then the evil people win. That is so true. And so let's start doing something before it's too late. For JTF until next week, this is Chaim ben Pesach, and for David ben Moshe, Shalom.